In this video, we'll be listing 10 MCU characters whose comic book counterparts wear a star-spangled suit that represents the American flag.
Number 1.
The first one we are mentioning is Steve Rogers, the original Star-Spangled Man with a Plan. He's the first MCU Captain America, with his suit changing in every movie. In the comics, because of conflicting ideals, he abandoned the American flag for a while and became known as Nomad. The closest thing we got to Nomad in the MCU is his dark worn-out suit seen in Infinity War, with the stars and stripes barely visible anymore, while he was on the run from the American government.
Number 2.
Next is Steve's longtime best friend, Bucky Barnes. Before being Captain America, Bucky was more popularly known as the Winter Soldier and bears the Soviet Communist Red Star on his metal arm. What happened in the comics, not in the MCU, is that he would eventually take up the mantle of Captain America during Steve's absence, with his suit having more black color, and he carries a gun and a knife on his belt.
Number 3.
Now let's mention another Captain America, John Walker, the guy who everyone loves to hate, although I like him. We saw him transitioning from the government-elected Captain America to US agent, with his suit changing from blue to black, very comic accurate. The MCU, however, did not include his original comic book moniker, which was Super Patriot.
Number 4.
Moving on, we've got John Walker's best friend and partner, LEMAR Hoskins, aka Battlestar. Just know that the numbering on this list does not reflect a certain ranking of anything, we're just sorting it however we want to. His comic book counterpart was quite different in that he actually had super strength like his partner John, and previously went by the name Bucky.
Number 5.
But having super strength isn't everything, as proven with our next guy, Sam Wilson, the official new Captain America. He started out as Falcon, and just like in the comics, he's probably the only Captain America who was specifically chosen by Steve Rogers himself to inherit the title, which makes him legit.
Number 6.
Now let's talk about Isaiah Bradley, the other black Captain America, or at least that's what he was in the comics, when he went behind enemy lines and fought in a Captain America suit. His MCU version has a rather similar story, but minus the suit. He also got locked up by the government afterwards, experimented upon, and was kept a secret all this time.
Number 7.
And this brings us to Elijah Bradley, who was recently introduced in the MCU together with his grandfather Isaiah, who he lives with. In the comics, Eli is known as the superhero Patriot, with a costume and shield that are visually similar to Captain America's. He got super soldier powers following a blood transfusion from his grandfather Isaiah, and maybe something like that will happen in the MCU, it's possible.
Number 8.
Speaking of the Patriot, the first person to use that moniker in the comics and in the MCU as well is Jeffrey Mace. He's the first Patriot as seen in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., although that show has now been thrown out of the MCU's canonicity at this point, so it's no longer canon. In the comics, Jeffrey Mace, aka Patriot, would even take up the mantle of Captain America during Steve Rogers' time being frozen.
Number 9.
And speaking of Steve Rogers, let's talk about his lover, Peggy Carter, who is also sort of a flag-bearing soldier herself. While she never wears such a costume in the MCU's main continuity, an alternate reality version of her in the MCU's What If series makes her into Captain Britain. But if you want to stick purely to the American flag, her alternate comic version in Marvel's Exiles sort of embraced the ideals of the US, and so she became Captain America instead of Captain Britain.
Number 10.
Next, I want to mention Peggy's niece, Sharon Carter, or rather Sharon's cousin in the comics, who is Shannon Carter, whose superhero name is American Dream. I know I'm cheating here, it's not Sharon but her cousin Shannon. I just really wanted to mention American Dream so much but couldn't find another way. But if you really want to get technical, Sharon herself did become Iron Patriot in the comics quite recently. in a suit of armor that bears the stars and stripes, so she still counts on our list here. Now about that suit, you'll notice it looks exactly like the Iron Patriot suit from the MCU, the one worn by Rhodey. And so this brings us to our bonus mentions of some other MCU characters. We have Colonel James Rhodes, aka Rhodey, who was Iron Patriot in both the MCU and comics, although in the comics he was the second Iron Patriot after Norman Osborn. Another extra mention would be Karli Morgenthau, aka Flag Smasher, who in Spider-Punk's reality is Karl Morgenthau, Captain Anarchy, which is the closest thing to Captain America in that world. And another character that deserves a mention is Alexei Shostakov, who symbolizes Soviet Russia instead of the US, hence why he's not on our main list. But if you want to get really technical, a lot of other MCU characters have become Captain America in the comics. Some for a really brief moment, like Clint Barton and Frank Castle. And some became Captain America in an alternate reality or warped reality, like the ones shown here: Carol Danvers, Johann Schmidt, Stephen Strange. All these characters appeared in the MCU, and there's really no end to it, so we won't go into it much. Maybe we'll just end it here. Thank you for watching.